Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachah Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And this is the book of Ezekiel Chapter 29, which, in the previous chapter, 28, it dealt more so with, it's sounded as though it's speaking about the king of Tyre, okay, which is just is really symbolic for Esau Edom. Okay, but in the 29th chapter, the Lord pretty much pronounces judgment against Egypt, by the mouth of Ezekiel. Okay, and also just keep in mind that at this point, the Lord has, had Ezekiel prophesy against pretty much all the neighboring nations that were around Israel. Okay, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Edomites, the Philistines, Tyre, and Zidon, and now Egypt. Okay, and indeed, the judgments that the Lord did pronounce against them, did come to pass. But there are certain times where, of course, what we read of in here, there are certain extra biblical sources or secular pieces or findings that sort of solidify what's in here, in the minds of people. But there's also times where you may read it in here, but there may not have been, findings for it in the secular history, because a lot of the information that you read about concerning history comes from archaeological findings, all right, be it some hieroglyph or some inscription or some clay tablet or something to that they're able to decipher and interpret and get the context. And so they draw a lot of inferences, but they're able to put together the picture of what's happening. All right, so just wanted to mention that real quick. Now, this is the book of Ezekiel chapter 29, verse 1. In the 10th year, in the 10th month, in the 12th day of the month, the word of the Lord Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Egypt. Speak and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, the great dragon that lieth in the midst of his rivers, which hath said, My river is mine own, and I have made it for myself. Now this is obviously speaking metaphorically, likening Pharaoh into this like sea dragon or the sea monster inside of the midst of the rivers, which the main body of water over there in Egypt that everybody pretty much knows is the Nile, right? But here the Lord is pronouncing judgment, or as he's about to, against Pharaoh, and saying that he's going to bring Nebuchadnezzar against them, all right, against Egypt, and take them into captivity and lay the land desolate for a period of time. All right, as we're going to read. And him saying that my river is my own and I've made it for myself is basically speaking proudly, as though he made that body of water, as if he was in some authority. Verse 4, but I will put hooks in thy jaws. Now remember that this is the Lord. Ezekiel is speaking against Egypt, and what's the message that's that he's giving here is that judgment is going to come against them, but it is spoken in a metaphorical way, likened onto a fish out of water. Okay, so that's why it says here, but I will put, so it likens Pharaoh into just like, this sea dragon or this sea monster or whatever in this water, and says, but I will put hooks in thy jaws, and I will cause the fish of thy rivers to stick onto thy scales, and I will bring thee up out of the midst of thy rivers, and all the fish of thy rivers shall stick onto thy scales. Now, analogically, right, in the analogy here, when you look at like ocean life, for example, typically you have some of these very large fish or shark or whatever that swim, and sometimes you'll find certain smaller fish attaching onto them, either for a ride or to feed off of them, or so on and so forth. Okay, but that's sort of the image that's being made here, where the Lord is saying, I'm gonna put hooks into your jaws, right? Like how you would do when you fish. And I'm gonna basically throw you out of the midst of the waters with all the other fish along with you. So in this analogy, Pharaoh would be likened onto this sea monster, and the Egyptians would be likened onto the fish. Verse 5, and I will leave thee thrown into the wilderness, thee and all the fish of thy rivers. Thou shalt fall upon the open fields, thou shalt not be brought together, nor gathered. I have given thee for meat to the beasts of the field and to the fowls of the heaven. So once again, you can picture what happens when a fish is out of water. You know, it's bad news for that fish, right? And like it says, it's prey to the beasts of the field and to the fowls of heaven. So they basically devour it. And in this case, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven would be the nation that the Lord is going to bring to cause his judgment upon Egypt, which, as we read further down, it'll tell you was the Babylonians. And all the inhabitants of Egypt shall know that I am the Lord, because they have been a staff of reed to the house of Israel. So now, keep, like, as we've read in previous chapters as well, you'll often notice that the Lord, he'll have the prophet mention the judgment that is going to come, and then he'll say, right, that they shall know that I am the Lord. Okay, now a quick precept for this is the book of Psalms. What chapter is this? 1 second, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, Psalms chapter 9, verse 16. It says here, the Lord is known, right? The Lord Yahweh is known by the judgment which he executeth. The wicked is snared in the work of his own hands. Hageon Salah. So the main part here is the Lord is known by the judgment which he executeth. That's why oftentimes you'll hear the saying here, right? And all the inhabitants shall know that I am the Lord, because of the judgment he is going to bring. They're going to understand that just like in this time when the Lord brings the judgment, the whole world is going to know that there's one true living power, and who is it that is bringing this judgment. Like when you even deal with the time of ancient Egypt, when the Lord brought the plagues, right, that you read about in the book of Exodus, when he brought those plagues upon Egypt and brought that devastation upon them, it basically sent fame, of obviously the Israelites, but mainly the Lord. It sent the fear of the Lord throughout the known world because of the judgment that he executed. So he was known. But as it says here, because they, the Egyptians, have been a staff or reed to the house of, or a staff of reed to the house of Israel. Now a reed, all right, I'll pull it up here. If you look at a reed, yeah, you'll see this is what a reed looks like. So it's very weak. Okay, you can't even really use it to support anything. And a staff is used to support, right? So the Lord is likening them onto basically unreliable. Verse 7, when they took hold of thee by thy hand, thou didst break and rend all their shoulder. So you can imagine somebody who's trying to use this staff for support, but the staff breaks and then they end up getting injured, or they end up injuring their shoulder. And when they leaned upon thee, thou breakest and madest all their loins to be at a stand. So now they're trying to lean on you, and you broke, and now you're throwing their whole back out of joint or out of place. And what this is referring to is times when Israel, even though they were going off and doing so because the prophets were warning them otherwise, they would basically make a league with the Egyptians, or try to make some form of, they'll allow themselves to be convinced by the Egyptians, and in hopes of rebelling against whatever nation or empire was in rule at the time. And what would happen was it wouldn't end well, because the Egyptians weren't able to deliver Israel, neither were they able to support them. Okay? And this even happened during the time of Zedekiah, right? When the Babylonians came, when Nebuchadnezzar came there to basically destroy Jerusalem, the Egyptians weren't able to help Israel. Verse 8, therefore thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I will bring a sword upon thee, and cut off man and beast out of thee. And the land of Egypt shall be desolate and waste, and they shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh. Once again, because of that judgment that he's going to execute. Because he hath said, the river is mine, and I have made it. Right, as we read up above, referring on to Pharaoh. So what the Lord is saying here is, I'm going to bring judgment against you, okay, and make that land desolate. Behold, therefore, I am against thee and against thy rivers, and I will make the land of Egypt utterly waste and desolate, from the tower of Syene even unto the border of Ethiopia. And you can look on the map to see where these are. They'll give you some approximate locations. No foot of man shall pass through it, nor foot of beast shall pass through it, neither shall it be inhabited 40 years. Now, this is, to emphasize the destruction or the desolation the Lord is going to bring upon the Egyptians as a form of judgment. Similar to how the Lord prophesied, or I keep saying the Lord, but I mean, ultimately it is the Lord by the mouth of the prophets, but how the prophets prophesied against Jerusalem about how the Babylonians were going to lay it desolate, they were going to destroy it, and it was going to be uninhabited. It was obviously, they were still like the poor of the land that were left over there. But generally, as a whole, that land was not inhabited. It wasn't fruitful, as it was before. And similarly, that's what the Lord is saying he's going to do to Egypt, right? He says here for a period of 40 years, which that 40 years represents, right, a certain time frame, right? Because there are times when the Lord deals with an exact time, and sometimes he deals with a time frame, okay, a measure. So it might happen, and sometimes the Lord, a prophet might prophesy and say 40 years, it might come in 30, it might come in 35, it might come in 50, okay? And sometimes it's right on the dot. So verse 12, it says, and I will make the land of Egypt desolate in the midst of the countries that are desolate, and her cities among the cities that are laid waste shall be desolate 40 years. And keep in mind that it wasn't just Egypt that the Lord was bringing judgment against, right? All those neighboring regions, right, that I mentioned earlier, the Lord also brought judgment on them. Where are we? Right, it says, and I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and will disperse them through the countries. Because ultimately what was going to happen when they got overtaken, they would be put into captivity. Yet now, when you actually look up in secular history, there's some historians out there that are of an opinion that this is like a false prophecy or whatever, because they couldn't find an account of this actually happening. But there's also sources on the opposite side that do have accounts here from Egyptian sources, stating an actual time period where you had people come in and lay that land desolate, that region that is referred to as Syene to Ethiopia. Okay, but at the end of the day, we don't seek extra biblical sources to validate the scriptures. I mean, it's interesting, it's nice and cool, but the ultimate source of truth, pursuant to, what's that, Isaiah 36 and 16? Let me see if that's the one. Or 34 and 16? Yeah, I think it's 34. Let's see. Yep. Yeah. Isaiah 34 and 16, seek ye out of the book of the Lord and read. No one of these shall fail. None shall warn her mate, for my mouth it hath commanded, and his spirit it hath gathered them. Right? So we understand that this book, it basically stands alone. It doesn't need any other book. That's why it's mentioned here that none shall warn her mate, meaning no other book is this. The scriptures don't need any other book to be mingled with it in order for it to be validated. All right. So let's keep on going. Right. So once they were overtaken, they were obviously taken captive into, foreign land. Verse 13, yet thus saith the Lord Yahweh, at the end of 40 years will I gather the Egyptians from the people whither they were scattered, and I will bring again the captivity of Egypt, and will cause them to return into the land of Pathros, into the land of their habitation, and they shall be there a base kingdom. Yeah, so pretty much after this, they would never be able to rise back up to how they were in past times, being like, at some point Egypt was actually like a world superpower in the East. Okay, that's when you even read about like the times of in the book of Genesis. That's the reason why when there was a famine, Abraham, first off, that's the reason Abraham went down into Egypt, right? Egypt was known. Okay, it was like a major empire. So they had it all. But the Lord is saying here, you're pretty much gonna when you come back into this land, you're not gonna be able to rise back up to that state. That's why it calls them base, right? It says into the land of their habitation, and they shall be there a base kingdom. So they're still gonna be there, but they're not gonna really be as they used to be. It shall be the basis of the kingdoms, neither shall it exalt itself any more above the nations. For I will diminish them, that they shall no more rule over the nations. So they're going to lose that dominion, and they're going to lose that status that they had before. And it shall be no more the confidence of the house of Israel, which bringeth their iniquity to remembrance, when they shall look after them. But they shall know that I am the Lord. So remember that in past times, Israel would look to Egypt for help. Okay, and they would make leagues with them. But the Lord is saying here, after I bring this judgment, it's no longer going to be that case, right? Which bringeth their iniquity to remembrance. So when Israel, right, when they shall look after them. So when Israel looks at Egypt again, they're going to remember how the prophets told them, no, them Egyptians are not going to help you, and yet they trusted in them. And they and more so against the Lord, right? They put more trust in the Egyptians as though they were gods rather than their own power. It says, but they shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh. And it came to pass, because when all this comes to pass, they're going to realize these Egyptians, they couldn't do anything. The Most High is the one that brought this judgment against them. The Most High is the one that returned them from their captivity. And it came to pass in the 27th year. So now Ezekiel is making account of another instance, right? The first 16 verses was in the 10th year. The 17th verse now is in the 27th year. So Ezekiel says, and it came to pass in the 27th year, in the first month, in the first day of the month, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, Nebuchadrezzar, which is, it's talking about Nebuchadnezzar, right, the second, but sometimes it's spelled here in the scriptures as Nebuchadrezzar. Still the same person. Son of man, Nebuchadrezzar, king of Babylon, caused his army to serve a great service against Tyrus. Every head was made bald, and every shoulder was peeled. Yet had he no wages, nor his army, for Tyrus, for the service that he had served against it. Now remember, a couple of chapters, ago, the Lord had Ezekiel prophesy concerning how the Lord was going to bring Nebuchadnezzar against Tyrus and to besiege them and to bring them down. So the Lord is here telling Ezekiel, yes, they went and did this, right? As it says, every head was made bald and every shoulder was peeled, which is a sign of mourning, because of the destruction that Nebuchadnezzar did. But he didn't really get, any wages. He didn't get paid for it, like metaphorically speaking, right? He didn't get any good returns out of this for the work that he did. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I will give the land of Egypt unto Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he shall take her multitude, and take her spoil, and take her prey, and it shall be the wages for his army. So I'm going to basically pay him for the work he did against Tyrus by my command, with the riches that he's going to get from taking over Egypt. I have given, verse 20, I have given him the land of Egypt for his labor, wherewith he served against it, because they wrought for me, saith the Lord Yahweh. Meaning they worked for me, right? So the whatever Nebuchadnezzar did, the Lord put him up to it. So he's saying, for the work that he did for me by bringing judgment against Tyrus, this is the payment I'm going to give him. Verse 21, in that day will I cause the horn of Israel, or of the house of Israel, to bud forth, and I will give thee the opening of the mouth in the midst of them, and they shall know that I am the Lord. So basically, the Lord is saying, after all is said and done, when we good, the Lord is saying here to Ezekiel that you're gonna, when he says, I'm gonna give you the opening of the mouth, remember that in previous chapters, the Lord said he would make Ezekiel dumb, right? So he's saying here, you're gonna speak unto them, and they're gonna hear you, and they're gonna know that I am the Lord, because what is it that Ezekiel was speaking unto them from the very beginning unto now? The words of the Lord. But now, as they come to pass, they would be believed. And that's pretty much it for Ezekiel, the 29th chapter. Like I said, it was mainly going into, as it says, the judgment against Egypt. So at this point, the Lord has pronounced judgment against Israel. He's pronounced judgment against all these nations that were round about. And that's why the scriptures say that he has made us a prophet unto the nations, because it's not just Israelites, but there are times when the Lord, before he does, right, pursuant to Amos 3 and 7, before he brings that judgment, even if it's against these nations, he'll put the Spirit on us, right, as you can see an account here, to prophesy against them concerning what the Lord is going to do to them. So with that, Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Brachah, Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.